Deidre Montague, and welcome to the State of Black Women series, where we will explore different topics that have a major impact on Black women. This is the final episode of the series, where we will be talking to Black girls, the next generation, with two special guests. Next up, I'll be in conversation with Alexandria ONUOHA, a PH.D. candidate in Applied Developmental Psychology at Suffolk University. Then I will speak with IVANNA Solano, the founder and executive director of Love Your Magic, a grassroots organization committed to the healthy development of Black and brown girls. You won't want to miss these powerful conversations. Stay tuned.
In elementary school, I feel like I deeply experienced the criminalization of young Black girls. I was taught from a very young age that my joy was disruptive. Gossiping to my friends about the cute boy in class led to me being publicly humiliated from my classroom. Sitting there, being loud and joyful led to me getting disciplined with red pieces of paper called community violations. And it was just any explanation of joy, expression of joy was quickly disciplined, and I was taught that it's not fulfill my white woman teacher's expectation of their classroom. I was not an empty recipient to whatever they had to give me, which is why I was constantly picked on. I was scoring, 40% on math tests because my confidence was so low. Like, my belief in myself was constantly challenged. And then I met my first Black teacher, Danya Wallace. Oh my gosh. She presented me the space to transform, truly.
You got it.
Oh, goodness gracious. Okay, it's okay. That's the impact that it has, like a positive impact. She taught me that. I started scoring 100% on every essay I was doing.
I know that's right.
I feel like she sat down with me and she taught me that my gifts and being myself were irreplaceable. And from that point on, the importance of self-love meant everything to me. And I can't believe that if I had not had that woman in my life, I would still have internalized the belief that I'm a bad kid. And I wouldn't be here with you today talking about how powerful I've become. And I've watched Black girls beside me internalize that same idea, that they are a bad kid, that they had to be sent to the principal's office to be disciplined, and they graduated with that mentality. And they're not sitting in these spaces learning about how powerful their Blackness is because of that.
That sound you just heard was from Elena James, a Belonging and Becoming Fellow alum of Love Your Magic, an organization which uplifts Black and brown girls and nurtures their positive identity development. She was one of the young adult speakers at Love Your Magic's State of Our Girls conference, speaking about her experience of dealing with the criminalization of Black girls throughout her school experience. Welcome back. I'm Deidre Montague, your host for the State of Black Women series. Today's episode will focus on Black girls, the next generation. Our first guest is Alexandria ONUOHA, an interdisciplinary scholar, facilitator, and advocate dedicated to fostering joy and well-being among Black girls and families. Let's take a listen. Thank you so much for being willing to be on here. My first question is, one of the places that Black girls spend most of their time is in school, according to the Girlhood Interrupted, the Erasure of Black Girls Childhood Report by the Georgetown Law Center on Poverty and Inequality. They have data that shows adults view Black girls as less innocent and more adult-like than their white peers, especially in the age range of 5 through 14. Can you talk about your thoughts about this data and why and how these perceptions can impact Black girls in negative ways in the school system?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here. So, as a researcher, specifically a developmental scientist, so that means that I'm interested in how we promote thriving for children and youth. And for my research purposes, I'm really interested in how do we promote thriving for Black girls, adolescent Black girls, but also adult Black women. And one of the things that I realize as a researcher is that there is a lack of data. So although that we have some of these data points, if you were to Google Black girl push out or the criminalization of Black girls or Black girls in the school system, school discipline, what you'll find is that there are different statistics and there are different data points, which are all valid, but it goes to show that we still need some more data that is consistent. And I think what contributes to this idea that Black girls are social deviants is people's perception because of media and also what is shown. So, for example, I work with Black girls in a youth development program, and I often get, Miss Alex, well, this teacher always says that I'm very loud when I'm just trying to communicate something. So these are like small instances. It's a small example, but it means a lot because instead of looking at that Black child or that Black girl as someone that is passionate or an advocate for their beliefs and their value system, they are looked at as aggressive. And that is because of how the media perceives things. Another example that I often give when talking about the perception of Black girls and how that manifests in school systems, when it comes to Black girls going missing, when Black girls are deemed aggressive, a lot of people don't realize that has really deleterious consequences, meaning that if they are pushed out of schools, that leaves them to being in susceptible, harmful contexts, which allows them to be in human trafficking or feeling like they have to go into situations in order just to meet their daily needs. So all of these things tie together. So I think these statistics are really important and they do tell a story, but I would encourage people to also advocate for more research when it comes to the school systems and the connection it has with things like human trafficking, this idea of adultification, and all of these harmful contexts. The other thing that I will say about the school system as well is in working in school, I'm a researcher, but I also work in schools. There's not a lot of Black women educators. Well, I don't want to make that blanket statement because there are, but it's overwhelmingly white people educating our Black children. And if we go down to the specifics of Black girls, that's a very unique experience. And it's really helpful to have Black educators, not just Black educators, but Black educators who understand things like misogynoir, which is the specific hate and prejudice. Black educators who understand that Black girls need their own spaces. And that is different ways that we can not only address some of this school push out, but to truly allow Black girls a space to talk about their struggles, but not only their struggles, what do they find is going to help them develop in a healthy way?
Thank you for that. When you were talking about adultification, that's another issue that a lot of our young Black girls are facing as well, being subject to this. And in the same report, they surveyed 325 adults from various racial and ethnic backgrounds and from different educational levels across the United States. And they found that they viewed Black girls collectively as more adult than white girls. And the responses also revealed, in particular, that participants perceived Black girls as needing less protection and nurturing than white girls, and that Black girls were perceived to know more about adult topics and were more knowledgeable about sex than their white peers. Can you talk more about what adultification means for those who aren't aware of the term and how this impacts our young Black girls educationally and within society?
Yeah, I love this question. So the term adultification, it simply means that, let's just for this example in particular, it means that we are describing Black girls or putting on adult characteristics onto children. And from a developmental standpoint, Black girls, adolescents, that's a developmental period, which is different than an adult Black woman, right? So oftentimes, particularly law enforcement. So, for example, let's say human trafficking and Black girls going missing. So oftentimes law enforcement will label Black girls as a runaway, which removes the responsibility for them to actually go look for that Black girl. And the reason why is because of adultification, right? This idea that they are Black girls, they are children, right? We know that they're children, but society looks at them as they know exactly what they're getting themselves into. This was their decision. Those are their consequences. And I think some people look at this as tough love, but it really isn't, because there's really no love in that. What it does is remove the responsibility for us to understand the intersectionality of it all, the reasons why Black girls are going missing, or the reason why they are in this unhealthy context. And I'll say, as far as Black girls being seen as socially deviant and seeing as more adult-like, it has historical roots of racism and slavery. The legacy of slavery in the United States really shaped our perceptions about Black people, and particularly Black women and girls. Black women and girls were often portrayed as aggressive or hypersexual. And we see this being mass reproduced in media outlets. And I know a lot of people may have feelings about this, but one example that I give when talking about these issues is Tyler Perry's productions. And this is not really about Tyler Perry, but just as an example, is like when we see these media representations of Black women and girls going through struggle and seeing them being objectified and hypersexual, a lot of people really take this as the gold standard. So, historical roots of racism and slavery, and then also the stereotypes of Black women. So, for example, the angry Black woman, the hypersexualized Black woman, and the welfare queen. So these are like three different types of stereotypes that are given to Black women.
I want to shift to another topic that is really of alarming importance when it comes to our Black girls, which is the area of mental health. According to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services Office of Minority Health, Black or African American females in grades 9 through 12 were 60% more likely to attempt suicide in 2021 than non-Hispanic white females of the same
Mm.
age. It's really, really alarming to hear this. And I would love if you could talk about your thoughts about this and what could be contributing to these high rates.
Yeah, it's really alarming. I actually recently gave a presentation about my research, and what I usually start with are similar statistics. I remember Time magazine had written a story. This journalist was documenting how Black mothers in particular feel about their Black daughters losing their life by deciding suicide. And it was really alarming because the mental health crisis for Black girls is something that is still undocumented, and people are not really talking about it, which is really concerning. So those are my initial reactions to this. And as someone who works with Black girls daily, I can see just the beginning stages or the warning signs where a Black girl feels really depressed or is experiencing anxiety. I think I have firsthand experience for sure, but also the research. And I think one of the things that contribute to this, there's a few things. So I'll take my time and go through it. The first thing is racial socialization. And in psychology, and I also think sociology, we have this term called racial socialization, which is basically how adolescents and children come to understand their race and ethnicity. And that could be through positive messages, but it also could be through negative messages. For example, like Trayvon Martin. Black parents have to give something called the talk. And people think the birds and the bees, right? That's one example of the talk. But the other is you need to be mindful of when you're interacting with police officers. That's the talk that Black parents have to give. And for Black girls, I think that this idea of racial socialization has a lot to do with them understanding their position in the world and a realization that this society really does not value them in the ways that they need to be valued. But when I also think about racial socialization, I think about the positive messages that parents, caretakers, and youth practitioners can give. So, racial socialization, some of those components are about positive racial identity. So, how do Black girls come to know that they are a Black girl through positive representations, or someone just saying, hey, you have this strength and I really want you to be a part of this organization, or, at school, maybe a cheerleading team or something, right? How do we ensure that their cultures and their cultural strengths are involved to promote psychological safety? Because that's what really it comes down to, of thinking about how do we prevent a Black girl deciding, well, I've had enough and I just want to end it all, right? I think there's a lot of layers to it, but I think this idea of racial socialization is really important, of just at a young age, how do we start instilling into Black girls that they are worthy and that their Blackness isn't something that they should be ashamed of, and that they should use that as a part of their strength and their identity. I think another component to this idea that we're seeing these rates increase, I think a part of that is also due to social media as well, things like TikTok and just the rise of male supremacist content online that Black girls are witnessing, are being exposed to, even when they aren't looking for it, just because the way the logarithm is, or just the way that these media companies have no regard for how harmful some of this male supremacist content is. And for those that are listening, what I deem male supremacist content is content, whether that's a podcast, a blog, or forum, TikTok video, that is promoting misogyny, or and specifically misogynoir, that places Black girls, that isolates them and talks negatively about them. So things like Andrew Tate, and things like Black girls seeing Angel Reese and Lizzo be really dehumanized. Black girls are on social media and they're watching this and they are being fed messages about their value. That is really important. And I think one of the solutions I've seen is how Black girls are creating digital spaces, or digital joy spaces. And that's something that I'm really interested in my research of: how do we create joy spaces, not just physically, but also joy spaces digitally and psychologically, right? How do we create this sense of bigger meaning and bigger purpose? So mental health among Black girls is a serious issue. And again, I wish we had more data. And there's one particular study that was done that talked about the relationship between racial, social, and depressive symptoms. And what the researchers found was that Black girls who are exposed to more negative messages about their racial identity reported more depressive symptoms. So that's just one example. And there's other researchers that have confirmed this, or have done previous research on these topics, which confirms that racial discrimination and misogynoir really do have mental health impacts. But there are things that I think that we can do as adult Black women to really help our Black girls. So those are my reactions to that, and happy to answer more follow-up questions.
Thank you so much for that. It actually helps me to shift to talking about the cultural strengths that our Black girls have. And I would love to really shift to celebrating those strengths that they have. They're still doing amazing things despite what they are exposed to. On a local level in mass, one example is a hip hop artist, Nay Speaks, is making
Mhm.
major waves in Boston in the industry. She recently opened up for Rhapsody in September, a hip hop artist, a national one, and is a nominee currently for the Hip Hop Artist of the Year award for the Boston Music Awards. And on a national level, Nakia Jackson and Kelsey Johnson have used trigonometry and have created a new proof of the Pythagorean theorem, the 2,000-year-old rule that explains the relationship between the lengths of sides on a right triangle while they were high schoolers in 2022. Now they're in college, have their findings published in a new study, along with additional proofs of the theorem in October, according to Smithsonian Magazine. Can you talk about the wonderful cultural strengths that our Black girls have, and how this helps them
Yes.
to succeed despite the society that they have to navigate through?
Yes, I love that. And when I read the article about the two Black girls and the mathematic knowledge and brilliance that they're putting out, that was amazing. Yeah, I appreciate this question. And I first want to start out by saying I've been really thinking about this idea of resilience and resistance. And it is a tension that not only myself, but other Black psychologists and developmental scientists are interested in, right? So this idea of being resilient, right? We know that resilience is this idea that you can withstand difficulty, that you can go through anything. You have the ability to bounce back. Now, resistance is this understanding, oh, like, oh, for sure I can bounce back, but I want to actually dismantle the systems that are even making me go through this in the first place. And what I see from Black girls in the examples that you named, and what I see, which I'll talk a little bit about, is moving from this resilience to resistance of really creating knowledge, number one, creating spaces, number two, and doing that in a way that is just unapologetically themselves as a form of resistance. So I think one of the cultural strengths of Black girls is resistance, and resistance, not just saying we have all of these issues, but this is actually how we're going to center ourselves and pour into our communities while making contributions. So one of the things that I see, so I feel like I do a lot. So not only am I a researcher, but I actually am a cheerleading coach, and I work with a lot of Black girls. And when I see them creating choreography and working together in the brilliance and creating new knowledge, that is really powerful to me. Music and dance and formations and all of these creative outlets are things that we do since the beginning of time as Black individuals. And even through the civil rights movement, even through Black radical resistance organizations and movements, we've been doing this since the end of time. So Black girls it's really nice to see Black girls continuing this legacy. And one of the other things that I've seen too is Black girls really leaning into this idea of Afrofuturism. Afrofuturism is a field of knowledge or just like art, scholarship that really imagines new worlds and new societies, right? And I think one person that I think of is like Janelle Monáe. And I see Black girls constantly pushing the boundaries of what's possible. And when I say create new knowledge, it's not always in the traditional sense as like academics, right? Like where you're publishing. Black girls do that as the example that you gave. But creating new knowledge is Black girls talking with each other and making sense of the society they live in. So oftentimes in my youth empowerment program, I talk to Black girls about things like period poverty and what solutions are. Like, what does a world look like where Black girls are valued? What does it look like? What does it feel like? And in that in it of itself is creating new knowledge and creating solutions and actions that can actually help us create this new lived reality. So I'm seeing Black girls tap into things like Afrofuturism, dance, and all of these interesting things that are cultural strengths. So going back to this idea of resilience and resistance, it's like, yeah, Black girls can be resilient for sure, but they're actually interested in dismantling these systems, literally burning it all down as they should, and recreating new worlds and new ways of thinking and new ways of doing, which I think is really cool and inspiring. And within my field of developmental psychology, when I teach adolescent development, I always start off the class talking to students about what are some of the misconceptions that people think about adolescents and children. And often my students say, well, they think that we're troublemakers, right? They think that we don't really know anything. And I talk to them about dismantling that notion, but I use Black girls as an example. Black girls have been a group that have been marginalized and isolated, yet they are able to continue to create knowledge, but they're also really interested in dismantling it. I often talk to my students about the misconceptions of children not being able to be geniuses or to create knowledge and co-create knowledge with each other. So I think for Black girls, I see examples of that every single day. Even when they are arguing amongst each other, they find ways for reconciliation and restorative justice practices and just the way that they treat each other. These are all cultural strengths that really need to be talked about. And I always say that Black girls exist beyond their trauma and their struggle. It's just a part of them. It doesn't stop them from doing what they want to do.
Thank you for that. This goes to my last question. When you were talking about how much you love seeing the girls you mentor doing their own choreography or just enjoying themselves and really settling into who they are and finding themselves,
what is the advice that you would give to Black women to help the next generation of Black girls to be their best selves?
Yes. One, we have to understand that this is a different cultural context. And I also think that, so I was raised in a Caribbean household. My mother is Jamaican and my father is Nigerian. So there is the race, but the ethnicity and the nationality also is important when thinking about like support for Black girls, because some Black girls are raised with a specific value system. And I just want to say that like we have to understand the cultural context that they are in and the pressures that they have and the pressure that they put on themselves because of society and because of social media. I think that allows us to understand and be slow to be fast to listen and slower to respond, if that makes sense. And I think another piece of advice for Black women that want to work with Black girls and that are interested in working with Black girls is don't assume that, like for me, one of the things that I always have to check myself is, yes, I'm a Black woman and I was their age. We have shared experiences, but that doesn't mean that we all have gone through the same things. So really understanding that there are shared experiences, but we have to make multiple truths visible so that we can really give the support, the individualized support that that Black girl needs. And I also think that emphasizing joy, I really do. I believe in that. My current research project is on how Black girls make meaning of joy. And I've had the pleasure of talking with Black women educators about using joy in the classroom, in their pedagogy, and what that could look like. That could be simply playing a Black girl's favorite song as the class starts, right? Having a class playlist. So I think really being creative and understanding their cultural context, but also truly making space for joy and happiness because they may not be getting it anywhere else. And you may be the person, that individual that is their first glimpse of joy. So really take that as a responsibility. Like for me, I take every interaction very seriously. And what I mean seriously is not that I am not fun, but I value even that 5 minutes that I have with that Black girl and really making sure they know that I have their back. Because I really think that's what it really comes down to. They want to know that someone has their back in their best interest. And it would be nice to say that all Black women are going to be supportive of Black girls, but we know that's not necessarily the case. So I just encourage people, if you're interested in working with Black girls, don't come in with any preconceived notions, truly get to know them and let them tell you about their needs rather than you coming in and saying, this is what you need. I think oftentimes when people are wanting to work with Black girls and support Black girls, it's this idea of an intervention as if there's something wrong with Black girls. There's nothing wrong with Black girls. It's more they need support and they deserve expertise because we have lived longer than them, right? They deserve to hear, like, how did you get through that, right? Whether that's relationships, whether that's career, whether that's I'm really struggling with a loss, a death. How do you deal with grief? All of these different things. You also have to be open. And I'm preaching to myself also. So I'm not acting like I am like this major expert, but they have taught me a lot about checking myself and coming in with truly a clean slate and really invested in understanding their stories. So those would be some of the things that I would encourage older Black women to take with them when they're working. And also, I think for other people that aren't Black women that are working with Black girls, I think that's important too, because oftentimes in the conversation in the beginning, we talked about how Black girls spend a lot of time in school. And a lot of these school systems, especially in the Northeast, they're being taught by white educators. So white educators also need to hear this as well.
Thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
This society does a grand job of telling girls that they are not useful. And I reject that with every fiber of my being. We reject that, I'm going to assume, by being in this room, with every fiber of our beings. And we reject it because we understand that girls do hold a power, not just when they become women or adults, but they hold it right now. Girls are creating culture. Girls are leading in conversations. Girls are holding much of the stories and the ways of knowing in our communities, and these are things we don't really talk about.
That sound you just heard was from Dr. Monique Kufson, an award-winning author, filmmaker, and social justice scholar with 3 decades of experience in the areas of education, civil rights, juvenile and criminal justice. She's the president and CEO of Grantmakers for Girls of Color, which has developed 4 signature funds, including the Black Girl Freedom Fund, and is also the founder and board chair for the National Black Women's Justice Institute. She gave the keynote address for Love Your Magic State of Our Girls Conference in the Howard Thurman Center at Boston University. Welcome back. I'm Deidre Montague, your host for the State of Black Women series. Today's episode will focus on Black girls, the next generation. Our next guest is IVANNA Solano, the founder and executive director of Love Your Magic, a grassroots nonprofit organization that is committed to uplifting, centering, and supporting Black and brown girls' positive identity development. Let's take a listen.
I just would love to just start off with, for those who don't know, if you just want to say your name and just a little bit about the organization for those who may not know about all the amazing work that you do.
Absolutely. So my name's Ivanna Solano. My pronouns are she, her. I am the founder and executive director of Love Your Magic, and Love Your Magic really came about as a conference. The first time that it came about, it was because as a teacher at the time, I was experiencing firsthand the ways in which Black and brown girls were internalizing messages that they were too much or not enough. And I was seeing that manifest in many ways, right? So the girls who had internalized that they were too much were the young girls who were being sent out of class at higher rates, being sent to the dean's office, who were told that they were too sassy, too loud, and had just too much attitude, when in reality they were just advocating for themselves in ways that adults did not deem appropriate. And then my girls who were feeling as though they were not enough were the girls who were hesitant to participate in class and advocate for themselves or speak up because they didn't see their brilliance in the ways that so many of us did. And so after really taking the time to reflect on that and also learning about Dr. Kufson's work around push out, decided to do something about it. And that is how Love Your Magic came about, really wanting to create a sacred space for girls to see themselves in the Black and brown women around them, and also an opportunity for those Black and brown women to serve as mirrors and windows, wanting girls to see themselves in the women and also see what they could be if that's the path that they choose. And so we've since evolved into more than just a conference. So now Love Your Magic is a nonprofit organization that does programs, events, and partners with schools and community organizations. Overall, we are committed to uplifting, centering, and supporting Black and brown girls' positive identity development. And we really empower our girls to use their voice in a world that we know too often demands their silence, while also really giving them the tools to confidently navigate and disrupt the systems that are not designed in their image.
Yes, thank you so much for that answer. When you talked about Dr. Monique, it made me think about her book Push Out. For those who don't know, the book is about girls literally being pushed out when it comes to school and being more harshly punished than their white peers. Can you talk a little bit about maybe some of those issues that your girls might be coming to you on a general basis with? I mean, there seems to be, along with being pushed out, the Law Center of Poverty and Equality did a groundbreaking study showing that adults view Black girls as less innocent and more adult-like than their peers, especially for the ages of 5 and 14, and that the survey participants compared to white girls of the same age perceive that Black girls are less nurturing and need less protection, need to be supported less, need to be comforted less, are more independent, know more about adult topics, and know more about sex. And also the suicide rate for Black girls has increased by 182% for Black girls 13 through 19 and are rising annually. So
Can you just talk to us?
about some of those issues, if those issues come up for your girls, and what is your specific organization doing to help uplift Black and brown girls who are going through these difficult situations?
Absolutely. So we definitely see this play out, unfortunately, in the lives of the Black and brown girls that we serve. Many of them, if not most, have experienced adultification and criminalization in schools and in our communities as well. I know that something that comes up often is really the lack of cultural sensitivity that a lot of the girls experience in the schools that they attend. As we know, schools are primarily filled with white educators, and a lot of times there's a disconnect between them and the experiences of our Black and brown girls. And so I think that a lot of times the girls talk a little bit about kind of those mindsets that they see their teachers have that are harming them as well. And so we talk a lot about that. We also talk a lot about the ways in which our girls are socialized to think less of themselves. And we also, something that has for the past few years really been a big topic of conversation is the mental health of Black and brown girls. So many of our girls are dealing with anxiety and depression, and a lot of times don't necessarily have the access to the resources or even those adults that they feel like they can go to and speak about these issues with. And so for us as an organization, it's been really a priority to not only give our girls the support that they need, but also think about who are those other folks who are tasked with supporting and uplifting our Black and brown girls. And when we think about that, those are the caregivers and the educators that are in the lives of our girls. So that is why our programming, yes, it's very much centered and focused around serving the girls, but then we also think about what happens when the girls go to school. And a lot of those messages are negated, or what happens when the girls go home and the messaging that they're receiving is also different from what we do and what we provide as a program. And so for us, it's been really important to hone in on the fact that the well-being of our girls is our collective responsibility. So what does it look like to also provide resources, engage caregivers and educators in conversations about what it looks like to show up intentionally for the Black and brown girls in their lives? And so for us, it's been really important making sure that we are all essentially playing a part in their well-being, because as I mentioned earlier, it is our responsibility. And I think it's really what makes an impact on the girls' lives. And we've also shifted our programming to meet the needs of the girls. I think for us, we also acknowledge that we are not the experts of the girls' experiences. They are the experts of their own experiences. So we host many focus groups. We survey our girls. We co-create program with the girls to make sure that what we are providing them is a service that they actually need and would benefit them in the long run. And that's been really powerful. It's also been really powerful to see the ways in which our older girls, so when we talk about older girls, I'm speaking about girls in high school, are also thinking critically and like thinking about how to support the younger girls. And so we also have some youth-led programs that I think really help us bridge that gap between the younger girls and the adults in their lives. And it also creates a really cool community that isn't only grounded in sisterhood, but also gives young girls an opportunity to see themselves in these older girls and aspire to be like them as well.
Absolutely. And it definitely showed during the State of Our Girls conference that was held. It was such a powerful event. For those who couldn't attend, I would love to, if you could just share a little bit about that and why it's important to have events like that specifically for Black and brown girls and for their caregivers and the community in general to better uplift our Black and brown girls.
Yeah, definitely. So the State of Our Girls this was our first year hosting this event, and it was really a convening to discuss the issues that are impacting our girls, but also really pass the mic to our girls and give them an opportunity to reflect on their academic journey and on their lives, really. So wanted them to share what it's been like to navigate school systems as a Black girl. What were the barriers? What were the highlights of their experiences? Who were those people that supported them and uplifted them, and how did they do that? Really, with the goal that the folks in attendance would not only become more knowledgeable on the issues that are impacting our girls, but also walk away with strategies of how they can better support the girls in their lives. So in the audience, we were intentional in inviting school leaders, educators, community members, funders, and also caregivers, really wanting us all to be in community with each other to think about what is our responsibility and then what commitment can we make to make sure that when we walk out of that space, we are clear on what it is that we need to do to support the Black and Brown girls in our lives and in our communities. And so we started the event by listening to Dr. Monique Kufson, who really was the catalyst for Love Your Magic to even come about. And she shared a keynote where she highlighted really from her experience and from her research what has been really happening with Black and Brown girls in schools and in our communities. And then we held a panel discussion with a few of our fellows who are a part of our Belonging and Becoming Fellowship. One was an alum, another was a current fellow, a Boston University student, and then a mental health practitioner. And collectively, they spoke a little bit about both their experiences and then the ways in which the mental health of Black and Brown girls can be supported as well. And I think these conversations are important because I think that a lot of times the experiences of Black and Brown girls are often overlooked. We don't talk enough about their strengths, but also the challenges that they're experiencing. And for us, it was important to shed light on that for them. And really, the hope is that every year we'll continue to host this event, give girls the mic to share their experiences, and also have folks invest their time, invest their funding, invest their resources into supporting and uplifting Black and Brown girls in our community, because we believe that is critical and it's what's going to help us shape the next generation.
Thank you so much for that. I would love to also ask you, there are a lot of initiatives out there that are about Black men and Black boys, which are super important programs. But since you have Love Your Magic, I would love for you to speak to the importance of having something specifically for Black and Brown girls to have that safe space to explore and to think critically and to mentor one another.
Absolutely. I agree. I think that programs that are focused on supporting and uplifting Black boys are so necessary. And there are so many folks who are doing wonderful work around uplifting and supporting Black boys. And we also need more spaces that really center, support, and uplift Black and Brown girls. I think that there are folks who are doing this locally as well, want to make sure that I uplift them as well. So we have the Boston Girl Empowerment Network, Young Queens Rising, Girls Reflecting Our World, who are folks who are really focused on the well-being of Black and Brown girls alongside us. And then nationally, Justice for Black Girls has been doing really transformative work in support of our girls. I think, as I mentioned earlier, I do oftentimes experience some frustration because I do think our Black and Brown girls are overlooked. And that is really unfortunate too, because it sends a message to them about their value and their worth. And so I think for us, it's been really important to make sure that our girls know that they're valued, they're seen, and they're heard. And I want that to be the stand that we take as a city, as a state, as a country, as a nation, because our girls are so important and they are already brilliant. We just need to make sure that we are pouring the resources, the time, the support that they need to really thrive. I know that during the conversation that we held at the State of Our Girls, one of the things that came up is that one of the girls spoke about the fact that she was seen as gifted. And because she was seen as gifted already, she didn't get much support. And that is harmful as well to our girls. So really wanting to make sure that we are thinking about what is our responsibility. And like, yes, this girl may appear to be good, may appear to have it all good, but the reality is we all can benefit from having that support that is so needed. When I think about my upbringing and how I grew up, I wish I had access to more spaces that were specific to Black and Brown girls, because intersectionality is real. And a lot of times you join programs that may be girl serving, but are not really focusing so much on what it looks like and what it means to be a Black or a brown girl. And I think that it's really important to focus on like the whole child, like what are all the things that are impacting us in our day-to-day lives. And that's really why I think the work of Love Your Magic is so important. And then being in community with each other. also is really powerful. I think a lot of times we need to feel like we have other folks who are sharing the same experience that we are, who we can learn from, who we can lean on. And I think some of us have been fortunate enough to have mentors, others have not. And so spaces like these are important because it gives girls the access that they need to not only resources, but also the folks in their lives that can really support their journey and pour into them.
So true. It's so good. My last question is, as we're coming into this election year with Kamala Harris potentially being the first Black and Asian president of these United States, how do you hope that the nation in the future would see Black and brown girls?
I would hope that the nation sees Black and brown girls for who they are: beautiful, bold, and brilliant, and capable. Like, Black girls can do anything. And I think there are so many women who are a testament to that. And I feel like if as a nation we really start to believe that, it'll, one, send a really strong message to our girls, but also really give them the opportunity that they deserve to shine in the ways that we know they can, and the ways that they're more than capable of doing. And so I think that is what I am hoping will be true. And then I also hope that as a nation we start to unlearn much of what we've internalized about Black and brown women and girls. There's so much that we have been socialized to think about Black and brown women and girls that is just not true. So I think it's important that we take the time to unlearn that. You have to acknowledge it, sit in that discomfort, unlearn it, and then take the time to learn the fact that Black and brown women and girls are bold, beautiful, and brilliant, and then create spaces for them to thrive, really. Pour into them in the same ways that you pour into others so that we too can have a seat at the table.
Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much again for listening to this episode. Special thanks again to Alexandria ONUOHA and IVANNA Solano. I really hope that you enjoyed the series. I'm your host, Deidre Montague. Thanks for listening.